Welcome back to Ray's Music, I'm Ray. If you're a musician, you might have heard of compressors. No, not this one. I meant these compressors that compress audio signals. It seems pretty difficult to use, but don't worry, today I'm going to explain the basics of how to use a compressor or how I use a compressor. Let's get started. There are some types of compressors. For instance, guitarists often use compressor pedals, or music producers use rack compressors, especially when they work in a studio. Both look different, but usage is pretty much the same. So what does a compressor do? As the name suggests, it compresses a certain amount of audio signals and evens out the gap between the loudest part and the quietest part of the audio signals. By processing an audio signal with a compressor, there will be less volume difference, so listeners don't have to constantly change the volume all the time. In modern music production, compressors are essential. In this video, I'm going to use a compressor in Studio One 4 to explain how to use it. Yeah, it's kinda old, but it still works anyway. There are 5 things that we need to know: threshold, ratio, attack, release, and gain. Controlling the balance of these factors is very important. There are some other things on the compressor, but for now, let's take a look at how these elements work. Threshold allows you to set the point that a compressor starts attenuating the signal. For example, if you set the threshold at -10 dB, the compressor attenuates the signal above -10 dB. Ratio is to determine how much you want to attenuate the signal above the threshold. For instance, a ratio of 2:1 attenuates the signal to a half of the original signal above the threshold, and a ratio of 3:1 attenuates the signal to 1/3 of the original signal above the threshold. Attack is to set how fast or how slow the compressor engages, and is indicated by time. Faster attack means the signal rather immediately gets compressed when it goes beyond the threshold, whereas slower attack means the signal gradually gets compressed according to the speed you set. Release is to set how fast or how slow the compressor releases the compression after the signal goes below the threshold. Faster release means the compressor rather immediately stops processing the signal, and a slower attack means it gradually stops processing the signal. Finally, gain allows you to change the volume. Because a compressor attenuates the signal above the threshold, it also reduces the volume, so you use this parameter to raise the volume back. Okay, now we know how they work, but how do we actually control them? I'm going to show you how I use a compressor with an example. Here, I made a drum loop and it sounds like this. Maybe you think it already sounds okay, but you'll hear the difference. By the way, you can download these stems. Check the link in the description to get the free drum stems. I have a specific flow when I use a compressor. I start with threshold, then ratio, attack, release, and finally gain. To set the threshold, I start from the highest threshold setting and seek the point where the signal starts sounding like it's getting compressed. You may have noticed a slight compression of the sound. This is the starting point. Now, let's set the ratio. On this compressor, the ratio is already 2:1 by default, so I'm going to start compressing from here. As you can hear, when you increase the ratio, what I call the ceiling of the sound comes closer to the threshold. If you increase the ratio too much, it starts sounding unnatural, so you want to find a perfect spot according to your preference. In this case, the ratio is 3:3:1. Let's hear the difference. Attack and release are the finishing touch for me. In my case, I set the attack time first and then the release time next. Most of the time, I try to find a place that the compressor naturally engages. Now we're almost done. Let's listen to the loop. For me, it sounds a little disorganized without a compressor, so by using a compressor, you can give the sound cohesion. Now, because the compressor attenuated the signal, the overall volume has been reduced a little bit. So let's adjust the gain. This time, the volume is about 1 decibel lower than the original, so I raised 1 decibel to bring it back to the original volume. This is a basic way to use a compressor. The goal in this example was to give a natural compression to the sound, but you can also intentionally use it too much to change the character of the sound, just like this. Eventually, it all comes down to your preference, so seeking your perfect setting is the key to use a compressor. There you have it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There are more to learn, but by learning the basics, you'll be able to get more ideas of it, and you can step up to the next level. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to this channel, and I have a Patreon page that you can download all my backing tracks and get some other benefits. Thanks for your support, and see you next time.